So let's get to our main event, our guest speakers, Marcus and Susan. This is going to be an interview style event, and it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Peter Gordon. Peter is our Director of New Initiatives for the Music Industry in the Cal Lutheran College of Arts and Sciences. I've had the distinct pleasure of getting to know Peter. I've come across very few people who know the music industry the way that he does, and I'm really excited to hear Peter interview Marcus and Susan. So Peter, take it away.
Thank you, Mike. Very nice introduction. I sure appreciate it. Hello, Susan. Hello, Marcus.
We're here.
Hello. Good evening.
How are you, Peter? Very well, thank you. So we've known each other for many years, and it's going to be fun to explore and discuss your journey as music tech entrepreneurs.
We're happy to be the guinea pigs for this this experiment.
Well, listen. First and foremost, you're both musicians, and I think that's an important starting point. We've had discussions on these lines, and I think the instincts that musicians and entrepreneurs share are worth spotlighting for a second. And the ones that come to mind for me are creativity, passion, adaptability, ability to improvise and innovate, resilience, and we could keep going, but there's a lot of shared DNA there, if you want to call it that, between musicians and entrepreneurs. And I should also add that you're both musicians, and yet neither of you are guitar players.
True.
Very true.
True.
And yet you've created a company in Line 6 that would become the #1 selling brand of guitar amplifiers.
It's the definition of irony.
Yeah, this is a company that would have a major impact on the guitar technology world. And when I'm saying world, we're talking about millions of customers worldwide. So that's just, let me think about that for a second. You've recently formed the Wolf Ryle Innovation Impact Group, a consulting firm that will assist businesses and utilize your instincts based on more than 40 years of industry experience. So why don't we go back to the beginning of this 40-year entrepreneurial journey and tell us how it all started?
This is where like the soundtrack needs to come in, I think.
Or a little flashback.
It started a very, very long time ago. I think, not a lot of people know the real story of the beginning, which was I was 12 years old and Marcus was 13 years old when we met. We both met in the San Fernando Valley. We went to the same junior high school at that time. And actually, because our sisters had a relationship, we ended up actually meeting for the first time at an Elton John concert in 1974 because there was an extra ticket.
The younger kids got to tag along.
Exactly. So as you can see, literally from the very beginning, music was the center of our entertainment. So, we were both musicians. Marcus, who I'm sure can speak about this more, but he was classically trained on piano for many, many years. I was not. I was a self-taught musician. I'm a singer and keyboard player and songwriter. And Marcus, of course, is a keyboardist and plays bass as well. So yes, our journey started very early, and playing in bands for us actually started very early. Ooh, I think an incriminating photo is coming up soon.
Uh-oh.
This is embarrassing, but here it is.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, you can tell the picture on the top was in the disco era, if you haven't figured that out yet. Anyways,
around 19, I think that picture is 1978 or so.
I think so. So, we really did a lot of music together. We played in different bands together, and that was always a part of the journey, even while we were working full time, et cetera. So at the time I was working as a credit manager at a hotel and also working for this incredible producer and songwriters, Jeff Berry, very well-known gentleman, and Marcus was working at Oberheim. So I think I'll pass it off to Marcus to kind of give you the origin story of the Oberheim piece.
Well, I guess what's interesting is that at that point, you mentioned the connection with the musicians. I would say both of us imagined that our careers would be in music. Susan was writing songs, performing a lot and everything, and I was playing in bands and doing sessions. And I happened to my father was a technologist and entrepreneur, so I was really fortunate to have been exposed to a lot of technology early on. So I took a big interest in synthesizers in particular from a very early age. And through a series of events, I ended up meeting Tom Oberheim just after I turned 19, and he offered me a job. And I can recall at that time really contemplating whether or not I wanted to have a real job, like many musicians, and but it was a job in a field I was really excited about. Music and technology just seemed like a very natural place for me, and so happy to be working in a related industry. A lot of musicians, maybe they get a job at a music store or a recording studio or something to be in a related industry. So I started working at Oberheim in 1980, and Oberheim was a synthesizer company. For those not familiar, here I'll share screen again, show another visual aid. These are synthesizers and drum machines. This is back before MIDI, and through the introduction of MIDI and kind of the first era of making music under digital control. Those analog synthesizers. For guitar players, probably most familiar with Oberheim because of Eddie Van Halen playing an Oberheim OBXA on Jump. So
that's a very young Eddie right there.
Yeah, that would be around 1983 or exactly. 84 or so. So Oberheim was kind of my my education for 5 years. There I worked with another engineer, French engineer named Michel Doidic. We worked closely together on many synthesizers, and which kind of leads us to the next chapter, which is after about 5 years. Although we loved working at Oberheim, it was a great experience. It felt we wanted to do more and be able to develop products in more categories. And honestly, like many small companies in our industry, sadly, Oberheim had its ups and downs from a business standpoint. So we had some concern about its future viability, and unfortunately, it did go. Oberheim, that version of Oberheim went bankrupt not that long after we left. So Michelle and myself and Susan decided to start a little company.
So you've started this performance. Susan, you're honing your professional skills in the kind of corporate and this executive assistant world, and Marcus, you're seeing this industry now from the product side of things, and the decision to start the consulting business, which was called Fast Forward Designs, 1985. Was it that you saw an opening in the market, or was there a product that you really wanted to develop that Oberheim wasn't going to be able to have the resources to let you do? What was
it's interesting. Actually, there wasn't a specific product idea. In fact, our first client had a specific product category in mind that we started working on. It was more wanting to just be able to do more things, but also, again, one of the lessons learned at Oberheim or any small startup is realizing how challenging it can be for a small company to have enough capital to really function properly. So Oberheim had one of its best years, and yet, like most manufacturing companies, had a line of credit with the bank, had to borrow money to buy parts and inventory. And it doesn't take much to go wrong to end up in a situation where you're out of compliance with a bank, and before you know it, they get to take the keys. So we just realized the basic concept of this company was, wouldn't it be great if we could do what we love, which is products for music, but not have any of the business risk that we just were witnessing at Oberheim? It's kind of, we wanted our cake and eat it too. We thought, well, if we could develop products for other companies, we set up a very simple business model where we would get paid for the development, but also get a royalty on the products, which we explained was really the guarantee that we were going to be trying to make the most successful things we could, because the best outcome for us would be if a lot of product was sold.
Exactly.
And so we were able to then, we quickly started getting many clients, and were able to do this development into many categories without the financial risk at all, and without needing a bank or anything else.
And so this is a time when pop music is really ruled by synth more than anything else. It was synth drums, it was keyboards, it was sequences, it was, you know, I mean, this was a time, effects processors, all kinds of things. Now, were you thinking out of it mainly from a keyboardist's mindset?
Keyboard recording and performing, you know, they just give you an idea. Here's another slide with an embarrassing picture.
Oh my goodness, yes.
You have to figure out, you can probably guess which one's Sue. I guess which one's me.
I'm the one with all the giant hair there on the left.
And these are some of the companies that we developed products for. But the categories that we did, here's some examples of the types of things we were doing at Fast Forward Design. So it was a lot of drum machines, synthesizers, and then led to probably the biggest success of the products we worked on at that time was called the ADAT for Alesis, which was really the first affordable digital multi-track recorder. And that launched in '91 and kind of ushered in the whole home recording revolution. And a classic example is something that was really very motivated by our own selfish needs, frankly, which I think is a lot of how people get into products in the first place. We'd be recording at home on a cassette deck or a small reel-to-reel, and you always wished you could make a recording that could sound as good as a professional studio.
Right.
So in short, that was most of our first decade at Fast Forward Design.
And I think what's important maybe to state here is that those 10 years of consulting that we did as Fast Forward Designs, the valuable lessons we learned along the way were unbelievable, because we were watching all of these companies and how they ran their business, the mistakes they made, the successes they had, et cetera. So we were very lucky to be a part of that. And again, as Marcus said earlier, not have this great risk like we felt some of these other companies were definitely taking a bit of risk on how they were running the business. But it really did drive how we wanted to go to the next step and how we wanted to have a company that had a different kind of culture than we had seen previously with these other clients we were working for.
So you are, for that decade, from 85, 95, you are consultants, right? You're consultants, and
yeah, we've grown to about 11 people in total. You know, mainly engineers, and people who are into this category of products and developing products for these other companies.
So, what motivated you to take that step from being consultants to fully fledged entrepreneurs? Tell us about that.
So, you know, you think about it, it was such a great opportunity. We basically had another 10 years of schooling, being able to, as Sue said, you know, see what's good and what's bad in these other companies, learn what works and what doesn't. And although we didn't have there wasn't a very specific timetable of when we might do our own products, we'd imagine that always being something we might do. And really what hit us in the first part of the 90s was realizing how left behind guitarists were in the technology revolution. So by that time, keyboard players could just push a button, get any sound they wanted. Plugins had started happening. So in you know, for recording, computer recording was starting to get going. There was so many tools, so much capability for musicians. And most guitar players, of which we've worked with guitar players our whole careers, you know, you typically would have them, they'd spend half a day trying to get the right sound. And then of course, you know, the equipment, the best sounding equipment was, you know, vintage, classic gear that could sometimes be finicky. And we just thought, why isn't there a better way for guitar players? if we could only create a way where they could get all the different sounds of their collections of amps and effects into one product, it seemed like a good idea.
Well, and since we were always roadies of our own bands, we understood and had empathy for those who had to carry equipment around.
Yeah.
So that was definitely one of the insightful things we came out of it as well.
So this is just curious. This picture is our very first trade show.
Yeah.
Laurie Morvan was our guitar demonstrator, great
Nice.
guitarist who still performs today.
Yeah.
In our little booth at NAMM in '96. And there's the picture of the first guitar amp that we came out with, which rightfully so, we were accused of it looking like a guitar amp that might have been designed by keyboard players.
We did get that comment quite a bit.
So we had a lot to learn, but fortunately we had some, initial success off the bat that was able to kick things off, and just, our second full year, or '98. Another visual example. I guess I should stop sharing screen. Make it a little more visible.
Go.
The pod, our little kidney-shaped
I remember
device,
seeing that. Yes, indeed.
which I suppose what ADAT was to recording in general, pod was for recording guitar. Just made it so easy for a guitar player to just plug in and turn a dial and get a sound that could inspire them. And kind of a unifying theme in the things that we try to do in our products for musicians was to, how do we make it easier for them to get something really satisfying and ideally inspiring in sound, so they can get back to making music and not spend all their time being a technician. It's like if you're a writer, do you want to spend your time learning every feature of Microsoft Word, or do you want to be writing your novel? So we're trying to make things more accessible than they've been for people who may not have had the opportunity to have all that classic gear.
There's one missing piece of information here that I'd like to just put a spotlight on, and that is your 1985 synths were largely analog. By the time you're in the mid 90s, and now you're at line 6, with your first amplifier, you've got this concept of modeling. And I'd like to just maybe spotlight that for the non-musicians, the business folks who are going, why was this different? It looks like another amplifier to me. What was different about this modeling, this idea of just being able to hit a button and get a great sound?
That's a good question. And, the other categories a lot of them had a lot of digital technology. It was guitars in particular that were left out. I think it was, the concept of modeling wasn't necessarily brand new or invented by us, but I would say it had been most elusive for guitarists because, frankly, guitarists are appropriately really quite discerning about guitar tone. And the reason that they would love a 1959 410 Fender Bassman or a Vox AC30 or some of these classic amps, it's not just nostalgia or enjoying this history of rock and roll. These amps sounded amazing. They really defined a lot of the musical underpinnings of the birth of rock and roll, and attempts to create software emulations it was elusive. It was difficult. So it did start out, it was a few years of experimenting and research with our engineering team to finally get to a place where we thought, there's finally enough digital signal processing power, and we've got enough algorithms that make sense that there's a product here, there's something here. And we patented it. It was the first patent of a modeling amp. And you could say for a guitar, it's a little bit like the desktop publishing revolution. Right. Instead of having to have little pieces of type for every font you want, why not just be able to pick the font you want on your computer? Guitar players would have, if you were really serious about it and had the money, you could have dozens of guitar amps and effects, each for a different type of musical genre or sound you're looking for. So why not be able to have all that in one product? That was
so in 1996, you got your first signature piece of equipment out there, right? And the company starts to grow. And you go through your first round of venture funding.
Right.
Let's talk about this, because I'd like to talk about what you've learned about the venture process, the do's, the don'ts, the lessons you wish you'd have known then that you know now, but also as you grow this company, how you add members to your team. I'm assuming that you want to look for musicians who are on the same wavelength with you. And so as you build this company, and it's essentially an innovative entrepreneurial company, what is it about the musicians that you would consider bringing on board that had the qualities that would make them fit your culture?
Good question.
Yeah, very good question.
Do you want me to, I'll start with the venture, and then you can start with the people.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I mentioned, we saw at Oberheim, and by the way, a lot of classic names. Think about Leo Fender and Bob Moog. These are industry icons and Tom Oberheim that lost their companies because of the challenges of running a business, even if you have great products and a great brand. So we'd seen how that could be difficult, and we were very fortunate as we launched our first amp. Actually, someone who'd been one of our clients when we were Fast Forward Designs, which is DigiDesign, which later became Avid. Peter Gocher was a founder of DigiDesign, and he thought we were doing something pretty cool with the amp, and he had experience with venture funding from his own company, and he brought up, is this something we might want to consider? And given our understanding of how it can be challenging if you do run out of capital, we probably, in hindsight, the thing that worked so wonderfully is we didn't actually need the money, or at least we didn't think we needed the money at that time, because we shipped our first amp. We had thousands of units on back order. So we thought this is going great. But we thought it could be a great idea to have some additional capital that could accelerate our growth. And with Peter's guidance, we pitched 3 different venture firms that all wanted to in the deal. So we were able to pick the partner that we thought would be best for our company, which is another important lesson learned. I think we picked very well with Sutter Hill and having Len Baker on our board. And as it turns out, the thing that's interesting in hindsight, anyone who's raised money, the best time to raise money is when you don't need it. And which sounds like a contradiction, right? It's like when you go to the bank to get a loan for your house, they're not going to give you any money if you don't have any means. So we raised money when we didn't need it. We raised, and they took a minority share. And not long afterwards, our back orders dried up very quickly. We'd hit, there's a notion of getting the early adopters in any new technology. And we kind of reached saturation of that first group. And it turned out that the many millions of guitar players, they really weren't ready for this yet. So we were very fortunate because that money we raised is really what provided the bridge that got us to being able to release Pod and continue on from there. So I would say, quite honestly, had we not raised that money, we might have had the same fate as many of the other companies in our industry of having run out of cash.
Yeah.
So when you reached that first plateau and you started to see the back orders drying up, how did the creative juices kick in? How do you sit down and start spitballing ideas for new products? And do you bring your teams together? How do you have these culture building meetings? I mean, how do you build this innovative culture?
So I think a part of that, we were, honestly, we have been lucky through our whole journey of Fast Forward, Line 6, et cetera, because we have had an incredible team of people. Yeah. I mean, you can't do this without an incredible team of people behind you. So we would have extraordinarily fun meetings at the office to product ideate, and they were lively and they were combative, but they were collaborative, and that dynamic worked really well. And I think the other thing to think about too is while we were shipping the Axis 212, and again, hoping that sales would increase, we already had ideas that were getting backlogged. So there was already product ideation going on. We weren't depending upon just one product to, accelerate our growth. So we were very lucky on that front. But But yeah, the culture piece is such a huge one in the success of a company, and it is from top down. And we were always about transparency and open communication and making sure everybody had a voice and bringing in people who had great creative minds and were innovative thinkers and all of that. You specifically recruit for that. And again, we were very lucky to find people that were along exactly those lines and really helped us get to the next level.
Were they all guitar players?
We hired several guitar players too.
I was going to say.
Yes, there is that.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So you're all sitting around and you're throwing ideas across the table. And what really
Actually shooting rubber bands at each other, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
So yes, what was the breakthrough that really took you to that next level? What was there a product? Was there an idea? Was it again just another level of modeling, or was it?
So Pod was a pretty big deal. You know, I mean, we got off to a pretty good start. Our first full year with just our first amp, we did over $3 million in revenue, and then we went from there to, I think, $9 million, and then we jumped to, I think we went right up to like $21 million or so
in our huge growth.
Our third year. I may not have the numbers exactly right, but Pod was a really was definitely the big breakthrough for us. And one of the things that's great, sometimes great products can just be happy accidents. It's like writing a hit song or having a hit movie. There's no perfect formula for it, but there are things we've come to learn about how to go about a process to improve your odds. And I actually used Pod in hindsight, because we didn't have those insights back then in '98, to really try to analyze and understand, why was Pod so successful? Why was ADAT so successful? We've had a number of successful products, and you want to be able to move beyond just the good luck and maybe good intuition to really understanding what can make something really successful. In short, Pod solved a very real problem. There was an important unmet need, as a term used by Anthony Elwick from Stratogen in a book called What Customers Want. It's a great book to read about this topic, but you know, if you think about it, the basic notion is any product you're making, think of it as it's going to be, will your product be hired by someone to do a job? Like hiring a person, right? And who are you going to hire? You want someone who can really do a great job, and there has to be a job you need. So in this particular case, it turns out guitar players, even if they could get great tone live from their amps, it took another set of skills to be able to capture that for recording. Yeah. You now needed to know about microphones and placement. You needed to have a great sounding room. And for many people, you actually had to be able to turn up loud, which if you lived in an apartment was just not even possible. So this replaced all of that. For those who aren't guitar players, this basically replaced your amps, your effects, your microphones, your speaker cabinets. You plug your guitar in here, and you could plug this right into your tape recorder at the time or computer, and have a finished, professional guitar sound. So it really, it took care of an unmet need. People wanted an easier way to get great guitar tone to record. And we ended up selling well over 1 million of the various flavors of Pods within a relatively short period of time.
So let me just go back a second to this image of you and your creative team all brainstorming. You're all musicians, most of you are guitar players, and you're all throwing ideas around that probably please each other here. At what point do you start to bring in the customer? Because you said that unmet need. How did you find out that unmet need?
Yeah, that's key.
It's critical.
It is, you want to be working with people that have great empathy for the customer needs to start with, because it's not like you want to rule out your own intuition, right? I always say, if you were a car designer, you probably wouldn't want to hire onto your car design team someone who'd never driven a car before, right? Right. So pretty much everyone in the design team was a musician of some sort, and that's kind of the common thread. Even if you're a lowly keyboard player, you still share some common needs as other musicians. But now bringing in the customer, what we found is that there were several things. I don't want to take up too much time on this, but we could spend a whole hour just on understanding customer
It's a great
needs.
topic. Yeah.
But in short, there are methods in which, through starting with qualitative data, focus groups, interviews, one-on-one, and so on, you try to learn and understand what is the customer doing, what problems are they trying to solve. It's not usually helpful to ask the customer what products do they want, right? I mean, we're now able to have this webinar right now because of the internet. Before the internet, there weren't a bunch of customers like us sitting around going, if only I had the internet, that would solve all my problems, right?
Right.
But if you'd understand the need, it's like, would people like an easier way to communicate, to access information, to make their airplane reservations, to order food, to do all these sorts of things? All those things could benefit from improvements. So our job is to try to understand, what's the customer doing? What are they struggling with? Is it about getting a great tone? Is it about musical inspiration? Understand what are their needs. Then the hard part is having smart enough people around to now go, what would be a real clever solution to that problem?
How did you find that out? Did you bring people into your facility and have them test your stuff? I mean, high-level guitarists, I mean, high-functioning professionals, that kind of thing?
First of all, we were smart enough to realize that it could take a lifetime if we wanted to invent all this. So we were fortunate to have talked with lots of different consultants and read lots of books to learn about what best practices could be. And in the case of this approach, we'd bring customers in, or sometimes we would set up focus groups. There were times it was beneficial to have for us to be anonymous.
Yeah.
Right? We didn't want to color the feedback we're getting. If we wanted general information about problems guitarists are having, it's good for that to be in a neutral place, like a center that does market research, and you get to sit behind the glass and listen in.
And I think that's critical for certainly the new product ideation piece of it, but I do think that we learned a lot as well in the current product line. We would bring customers in, we would get feedback about the negative and the positive of the current product, because that then drove what the next iteration of that product was going to look like.
That's a key point, actually. Yeah, the iteration is something the customer could do really well. And another tool that we used in line 6 that was very effective. It's something called Idea Scale, and it's a method in which the customers can create an account and put ideas, usually about a specific product. Maybe they have a pod and they wish the pod did this, or they don't like this sound, or whatever. They make their comments, but it's kind of a social driven tool from the customers, in that all the other customers can vote thumbs up or thumbs down on other customers' ideas. So essentially, you kind of get this instant polling tool, you could say, of which at line 6, I don't know what the current numbers are, but I think we had tens of thousands of customers participating on this, so that you could, a product manager, product owner could put an idea out there and see how it's reacted to, or as Sue said, we could just. They're very happy. Musicians are very happy to tell you what they think, good and bad.
Good and bad.
Did you have sales teams out in the field going to large retail stores, Guitar Centers, so on, Sweetwater?
Yeah,
absolutely.
And you were getting feedback from them as well, right?
We get feedback from them, and it was great. We pioneered a bit of a sales approach back in the in the 90s when we launched Line 6. We had a team of at least a dozen.
There were 13, yeah, exactly.
We called them product specialists. They were amazing. The first requirement is they had to be the most amazing guitar players you've ever heard, and believe me, they were.
Yeah.
And many of them are still in this industry and very successful in a lot of companies. But at the time, most of them were working musicians. And we said, look, your job is not sales. We believe that sales should be something that, if your product really solves a problem, you could like say about a product selling itself. But what's key is if you don't know this product solves your problem, you're not going to buy it. So their job was to go into guitar centers and other retailers and just do clinics and training and demonstration and show people cool stuff and play guitar, which they did very well. And that's, we had a huge uptick in our sales because that was the way people first got a chance to experience what this modeling thing was all about. And we'd get feedback from them, from the customers directly in the field.
So by 2008, you've passed 100 million in revenue. You have 250 employees worldwide. How would you define what the company culture was? And was it something you paid specific attention to building?
Yeah, so I think, it's 2008's a funny year. So
yes, right.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So certainly the company culture was outstanding. I mean, we were growing rapidly, we were hiring rapidly, and the company was healthy. We had the biggest year ever, and then of course October happened and the world fell apart. So as
financially, a little different
financially,
than the world's going through right now, but yeah,
so
there was a big financial.
Yeah, and like we often have to do in business, it was time to pivot. And unfortunately, we did have to do layoffs, and we did have to figure out how we were going to get through this next chapter, because like every company after the whole, blow up in October, we had to figure out what we were going to do next. So it was a difficult time, to be honest with you, coming out of the best year ever to still create this engaging, motivating, wonderful company culture to get through this together. But that was the whole point of it. We did get through it together. We made sure we were fully transparent about what was going on in the company and how we were solving, all of these issues that we were dealing with. And we have a very loyal group of employees who stood by our side and helped us get through it.
Well, I think one of the things that really helped most companies when they start out, you don't think about culture. I mean, think about it, it's like, again, the music analogy. If you have a band, everyone who's played in bands, there's the bands that it was amazing. It was like the best experience.
Yeah.
It's like you almost didn't even have to say anything to each other. Musically, it's collaborative. Everything is just great, right? I mean, that's a type of culture. And then you had bands where it's like, boy, that bass player, I tell you, right?
Right.
And, so companies are a similar thing, but like bands, most companies start out where culture is just something that happens. You always have a company culture, but no one may articulate it. And what was really fortunate for us is we realized we went through a few of our growth spurts where you get to a point where you have so many people where you realize if you don't articulate what are the key values of the company, what do you stand for, why you're there in a way that can be meaningful and resonate with your employees, the culture will evolve whether you like it or not, and it may not evolve in a way you want.
And I think what's also important to point out, and again, it's great lessons learned, is that we were an international company. We had multiple international offices. So it was not just about the US staff. It was trying to make sure you're engaging and motivating everybody around the world. So there was this fabulous connectivity that we had with everybody. And like I said, I mean, we purposely recruited for people that we knew were great culture fits.
That was the key. Once we had our culture really defined, when you do the interview process, you now actually knew the right questions to ask,
right,
to see if they would be a good fit in the band.
So let's talk branding for a second, and maybe take a big step back. Where did you come up with the name Line 6?
It's a fun story. I'll make it very quick for those who have not heard the story, but back in the sort of fast forward days, and again, we were doing a lot of work for a lot of other clients, and Elisis was actually one of our leading clients, who was a majority of the revenue that we were bringing in at the time, and they would often come and visit us. And to be honest with you, we did not want to share with them at that time that we were developing this new product because they were a little territorial and kind of wanted us all to themselves. So at the time,
it was just research at the time.
It was just research.
We didn't know we would have a product.
Yeah.
But we were working on it.
Yeah.
At the same time in the back of the office.
We just didn't want to tell them. So at the time in our offices in Culver City, we had 5 phone lines. So when somebody came in from Elisis and they were visiting, our receptionist would get on the all page and she would say, Eric, line 6, Eric, line 6. And that was a code word to say, shut the back door where we were working on this development, because we didn't want to tell them
And stop playing
this was
guitar.
happening. And stop playing guitar.
We'd have
Yeah.
the guitar amps cranked up in order
Yeah.
to do measurements and things like that. So it was a fake phone line.
It was a fake phone line.
And actually, the interesting code is it was never intended to be a brand name. My goals for a brand, it's like naming a band. I wanted something that was 2 syllables and did not mean anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because of great companies like Sony and Roland,
Right.
and we brainstormed forever. And Sue finally we couldn't come up with anything. And Sue finally said, well, why not just line 6?
I had the epiphany.
I was like, well, okay, here it is.
So by 2014, Line 6 has reached a point where either you're ready to step aside or Yamaha comes knocking on your door and said, how did this process work? Because this suddenly, this is a change. This is a change point, right?
It's great. Again, I would credit Len Baker, who was on our board, who was very seasoned, venture capitalist who'd been involved in a lot of companies, and he summed it up very simply. Fortunately, it was a venture firm that was patient, which was one of the things we were looking for, because we had no idea what our time horizon would be. But when people invest, they do expect someday they're going to make some money out of it. And his advice was simply, build a great company. We will intersect with the right opportunity when we intersect. That's whether that meant going public or being acquired or whatever. Our core goal was, let's just build a great company that has real brand value, really great people, technology, and we just happened to intersect. And near the end of 2013, Yamaha, we were actually unaware of it at the time. Yamaha had publicly stated in their every 3 years they do their 3-year plan, that they put aside a big chunk of money because they wanted to become an even more international company and to do acquisitions to broaden their capabilities and to bring new entrepreneurial and innovative people into the company. So the conversations went very quickly, and I'd have to say that Yamaha, it felt like such a natural fit for us. They have such a history of innovation, and they have such a great culture, and we knew that they really valued what we had built, and it was a fantastic opportunity, and we were really happy to become a part of Yamaha. And so our intention was not like, oh, we're done doing Line 6. In fact, it reinvigorated things and started a whole new chapter. And we stayed over 5 years, you over 6 years.
Yeah, and I think an important piece to understand too is we had suitors over the years. We had companies that talked to us and said, we're interested in an acquisition strategy with you guys. But for us, we always knew that it had to be the right fit. That was really important, and that we were
like hiring the right people.
That's it. It's the same philosophy for sure. Yeah, and we wanted autonomy. That was important.
So as you look back from that point to all that you had built, were there certain expansion ideas or products that you tried or things that failed that you think could have been done differently?
Yes.
And what are the lessons learned there about losses, failures, that kind of thing?
Well, lots.
So many lessons learned.
Lessons. Again, I think it's okay to just remember that success is elusive. It's again, if you use the music analogy, you could be an amazing songwriter. Not every song's going to be a hit. I think, honestly, every product we did, I think its foundation and its the core benefit it was trying to serve was good, was sound. Sometimes things took too long, cost too much, missed the mark, or maybe we didn't clearly understand the size of the market, or maybe it was ahead of its time. One of the products we did was called Guitarport Online. We were actually the first legal music streaming service, launched in 2002. before iTunes existed.
Wow.
And we have 6 patents on the technology. And basically, for $100, you could buy this little guitar interface for your computer, and you could play along with Jimi Hendrix, and it would give you your right guitar tone. And we had licensed all this music. And in fact, it was the idea that resulted in us choosing to do a second round of venture. Because it was a pretty exciting idea at the time that the internet was still in its pretty early days. And overall, it was moderately successful, but I would say that would be an example of a product that, by looking at it today, it was just too early.
Yeah.
It was
But we were able to use some of the technology and products in different iteration, right? So that was a positive that came out of it.
The technology got used in lots of other things. So it definitely wasn't wasted. But
so let me pivot for a second here and go back to something I said at the beginning about musicians and entrepreneurs essentially having a lot of shared instincts. You mentioned a couple of iconic names, companies like Oberheim and so on, who were obviously founded by visionaries of a time that had not grown up with technology. And I wonder if, there was a cliff that they just kind of reached and they couldn't go any further. But I'm thinking musicians today are growing up with this technology all around them. So I'm wondering if they're better wired now to be entrepreneurs, because they're thinking more agilely, or, what's the connection? Is there any difference between the musicians that you grew up with back in the 80s and the giants that you worked among back then?
I just my opinion, I don't think that innovation spirit actually changes. Jimi Hendrix was an innovator with the latest gear of the time. Mozart was an innovator with the latest gear of the time. An
innovator, but not necessarily an entrepreneur.
Okay, yes.
True.
I completely agree. Yeah. But I think for the most part, an entrepreneur, an innovator, you do have to continue to evolve.
Right.
So there's a great book called Innovator's Dilemma. It talks about a classic problem that innovators can have, where they get success and they're really kind of too anchored in that world, and they don't see the young upstarts that are going to come and eat their lunch. But you also have examples, even in the audio industry. I always give as an example Dolby. For those old enough to remember, Dolby was a hugely successful company doing noise reduction for analog tape.
That's right. Yep.
And it was a licensing model. It was brilliant. Now, by most textbooks, Dolby should have ended up like Kodak.
Right.
Because no one uses analog tape anymore. And yet there's a company that somehow had the entrepreneurial spirit and innovation.
Reinvention, right?
They now are a huge leader in digital audio.
Yeah. And,
are in virtually every consumer audio experience we have. So it's about continually reinventing and innovating and not being afraid to render your old stuff obsolete.
So I think that's really interesting, because this notion of evolving careers is a theme that I see from the beginning for you, with musician becoming consultant, becoming entrepreneur, and now you're stepping into the innovation impact group space, where you are getting a chance to share your wisdom and maybe nurture some up and coming folks that were just like you back in the day.
That's really what we hope to do. I mean, we were very lucky to have people who helped us along the way that we learned from, and this is an opportunity for us to hopefully help others for their dream. That was our dream. We had our journey, and really help people with their own vision and their dream, and maybe help them to see the path that can lead them to their best success.
So with this impact group, is there a financial aspect? Is there an organizational aspect, leadership, culture? How does all of those factors work into your model of what you offer?
Yeah, so I think it really depends on the needs of the company. When a client contacts us, it's a lot of conversations about really figuring out what their next chapter is and how we can help get them there. And it's really everything from startup companies to companies that have been established for multi-decades. So I think
some who want to reinvent themselves.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So it's certainly fun for us because we get to really, deal with clients that are sort of in all aspects of their business journey. And that's a lot of fun. So, including corporate strategy and product ideation and organization development and all that stuff. So it's a lot of fun. Yeah. So we determine really what we can do for these companies, and then we kind of, base our fees on whatever that looks like.
And, basically between the two of us, we pretty much have had to function in every possible role of companies, and, so that's what's exciting to be able to share, with others today.
Since we've got quite a few students in the audience, I was wondering what advice you would give to somebody whose passion right now is focused, say, on songwriting, production, that is looking ahead at the music industry as a huge question mark, but knowing that there are tons of opportunities, so, the students who are passionate about music right now, how do you encourage them to go explore the unmet need?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think there's so many tools out there now. I mean, I think, we both, of course, have mentored a lot of people over the years. And I think the one thing we always say, which I hate to say it is Nike's tagline, but you have to just do it. You got to just get out there, do the research, don't just sit and ponder in your house what it is you want to do. It's really about getting out there and getting the experience. So to me, it's just be doing it, getting out there and gigging if that's what they want to do, and actually be, live gigging musicians, or talking to people at post-production houses or recording studios, or, whatever, if that's where they want to go. And that's how you learn. That's where it will come. That's where the ideation comes.
But in companies like Line 6, there's so many different disciplines.
Yeah.
I think the other thing musicians can look at is, what is it in your life and doing what you do musically where you look at elements of the tools you use, or the marketing that you're receiving, or what the store is doing, and which are the things that you're going, that doesn't seem right.
Right.
I could do that better. Why don't they do it like this and this and this? If those can be clues as to where your talents might be. Maybe you could be brilliant. You're a brilliant lyricist, but you also end up being a brilliant copywriter and being able to convey to musicians why a product is wonderful.
Yeah.
Or if, you give the example, if you're the kind of person that every time you pick up a TV remote control, you're kind of cursing at it and going, this button should be here and this should be there. And those are signs that you think you can build a better mousetrap, or you can pursue those and you can hone those skills. And you do have to hone them, just like playing a musical instrument.
Yeah.
You're not going to instantly have the best idea. You might have, even after 15 years, you might have a guitar amp that looks like it was designed by a keyboard player. So you got to keep doing and learning. That's kind of what you mean. Just do it.
So for the Wolf Ryle Innovation Impact Group, it's apparently not that easy to say.
It is not.
Who are your ideal customers? Who's going to be finding you, and what would your starting point be with consulting services? Talk about that kind of general. I mean, you kind of touched on it just a minute ago, but just go into a little bit more about it, because this is obviously the next phase of your careers, and it's kind of a fascinating one.
Yeah, I think, for us, it almost feels like we're going back to fast forward designs days a little bit, to be honest, in that sort of consulting world. And I think it's really all over the map. I mean, yes, we deal mostly with MI companies, but the people who are reaching out to us, I mean, like I said, it is every aspect of where they are at in their own journey.
It's people who, I think the people who get the most out of us are people who share that passion for continuous learning.
Yeah.
for trying to create the best outcome. And, applying best practices, it can, I remember, I feel lucky. I learned at a very early age. They always say, you learn from your mistakes. I always thought it was much better to learn from other people's mistakes.
For sure.
Because it certainly can be cheaper.
Right. Right.
So, this is, if that's someone's point of view, that's like, boy, if there are ways I could learn a shorter path or have someone to help crystallize our strategy or make introductions. We've been in the industry so long, we end up working with lots of people who are interested in meeting people from other companies or mergers and acquisitions, since we've done.
We're like a dating service for companies. You got to think of it that way.
So you just mentioned a phrase, and I think this might be a really nice way to wrap this up. The idea of continuous learning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we talked a little earlier about some books that inspire you when it comes to thinking, styles of thinking, ways in which to uncover potential ideas inside of you just by reading certain books. Are there authors and titles that you might want to just share with the audience?
Sure.
I mean, we have so many favorite ones, but I mean, like Built to Last for me was, I think, a pivotal one. And one in sort of the early days of our company was 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which actually at that time
for culture,
it was huge for sure. So that would probably be my top 2 picks.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this book called What Customers Want by Tony Ulwick from Stratogen.
Mm-hmm.
That gives some nice insight into figuring out how to understand customer needs. It's called The Innovative Leader. Is a book that I think really helped, especially in our later years, in formulating how we wanted our culture to evolve. Basically, moving beyond, traditional companies have been command and control, and innovative leadership really helps to build much more of a collaborative culture. But there's a bunch of others we could maybe we'll.
You mentioned
create a little list to send to you, and you can and
I think the one thing I think is important, I think that I'd like to just mention to your students as well, is don't be afraid to reach out to the companies that you look up to see if there are mentors there that are willing to spend time with you. Because the truth is, especially in our industry, there are a lot of people who are willing to give time to these young people that are really wanting to become entrepreneurs themselves, and they can be very inspirational. So I think that's a great mechanism to use.
So one final question just came in. What's the, actually there's 2 questions. What's the role that you have now with Line 6, which is officially the Yamaha Guitar Group? Is that correct?
Yeah, we evolved. We were able. Line 6 became Yamaha Guitar Group as a corporation, and in order to connect for the customer, the Line 6 brand, Yamaha guitars, and Ampeg bass amplifiers, which we acquired in 2018. The company. It's really so gratifying to see a company grow, and it's almost like raising kids. You have them grow up, and we went through some adolescence, and now, the company dated and got married to Yamaha, and we built a fantastic team there. And, in 2019, we realized things are working so well, and the team is so capable in handling it. It seemed like it was a good time to pass on the reins and to move into a new chapter and continue to cheer. Like you do with any children, you cheer them on, and we Line 6 has continued to grow, and Yamaha as well, of course, and we're thrilled to continue to see their success and all that they're doing. And now we're just happy to be more like
watching it from afar.
Be more like grandparents and help people with their kids.
Well, right now we're living in unique times, and the music industry has been hit particularly hard with cancellations of all live performances, but what I'm seeing more than anything else is this interesting emergence of new business models as as concert artists are starting to find ways to connect with their fans online.
Great.
Yeah.
So this whole conversation about entrepreneurial thinking and musicians, and it's like musicians have been forced into this moment of having to survive.
Yeah.
And there's some very interesting examples out there that we see on a regular basis of choirs and orchestras that are all kind of stitched together in virtual fashions. And it really is, something that reminds you of how much music, connects us all, and how, with all benefit shows and things, it's usually the music that brings you together. Watching Saturday Night Live the other night and watching Miley Cyrus, I mean, she was amazing. And so this, the importance of music and this evolving sense of how the business keeps growing, how your talent keeps growing into a business. Well, listen, this has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you both very, very much for being with us.
You're very welcome.
Been our pleasure.
It's our pleasure.
And hope it was worthwhile for everyone out there.
Yeah, stay safe out there, everybody.
All right, thank you. Back to you, Mike.
Thank you, Peter. So wasn't that fantastic? This is my least favorite part of the event, because normally we'd have a round of applause. So here's what I want you to do. We can't hear you, but we can feel you. So everyone who's still on the call, stand up, clap and scream as loud as you possibly can to offer your thanks to Susan and Marcus and Peter, to the point where your family's going to come rushing in and ask what the problem is. I'll give you a moment. While you're doing that, a few more announcements. We're picking up the pace with events. We're having right now the School of Management a prime competition. This is a student competition. This is a competition that I believe it's global. It's about the UN sustainability goals. If you go to clusom.org/prime, you can see the students' projects, and in 2 days, they're having a live awards presentation by Zoom. On the same day that the Prime competition wraps up, we will be starting our new venture fair. The new venture fair this year is going to be online, of course. We're going to have a website, same one as the Prime competition, where the students are going to be showing off their projects. They will be competing for cash prizes. And we will have a virtual demo day on May 6th, also live, also on Zoom. The School of Management has been running a Forward Together webinar series with guest speakers related to the COVID-19 pandemic. The next one coming up on May 13th is entitled Design Thinking Pre and Post COVID-19. I believe the speaker is Ravi Swanee of RKS Design. Ravi's a really fascinating speaker. And then also don't forget that starting today, our virtual Festival of Scholars began. This is a long-running Cal Lutheran activity where we hear from our faculty researchers and student projects. So make sure you visit Cal Lutheran and go check out the Festival of Scholars. And of course, we'll have more virtual ESS events coming soon. Thank you very much for your participation tonight. We hope to see you at future events. Thank you one more time to Marcus and Susan and Peter. That was wonderful. And we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.